Hello there, Amanda. Welcome.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's such a treat to have you. And listeners, you may remember Amanda from the days of what, 2006 and 7, maybe, whenever you would guest blog on my blog back way back in the day.
Way back in the day. Oh, gee,
Gee, we were babies.
we were little babies. Oh my gosh, that feels like a whole different lifetime.
It was a whole different lifetime. Yeah.
Goodness, my goodness. But
And then here
yes,
we are,
and here we are.
midlife.
Yes, gosh. Yeah, it's funny because that takes me back to I was in my 20s then, and what a truly different time of life that was.
So tell me how your perspective on things have shifted, especially if we think about since then. That was you had creative DC, you were living in DC. I don't know if you discovered improv yet, but around that time, I think you were. And then here we are now, right? Like almost 20 years later. So just tell us a little bit about how your perspective on life has really shifted as you've embraced the stage of midlife.
Yeah, I think that improv was a really big ingredient to add to the mix for me. Learning improv comedy, its lessons seeped into the rest of my life and really made me feel like I had permission to improvise my life as opposed to following other people's scripts. And I think when I first met you, maybe not when I was had reached such great heights as to be a guest blogger, but when we met, I was very lost in my early 20s. And I think a lot of my lost feeling and my unhappiness had to do with feeling like I was supposed to be fitting into this way of being an adult that just didn't feel right for me. And so I think the biggest difference between then and now is I'm certainly not trying to fit anybody else's script. And I, in fact, long ago gave that up and am really much more confident making choices aligned with my inner guidance. And even if those choices look strange to other people, I really don't care at this point. And I think before it wasn't so much that I cared what other people thought. I just thought I was doing it wrong because I kept wanting things other people didn't seem to want.
And somehow this just brought me back to Trinidad, Tobago, right? Where, and what was that? That must have been like '06, I think.
No, yes, exactly. It was '06 because it was a key birthday for me. That's what I
Ah,
gave myself the gift of that trip.
ah. And I just remember how you've shared that was a bit of a life-changing moment for you. I think
Oh,
doing a solo adventure far from home. But
yeah.
I'm curious how anything that came out of that experience, since you did coin it life-changing at one point, how that has affected you or continues to show up even now for
Yeah.
you.
I had never gone on a trip by myself for a week before. When I think back over my life, it's really interesting. It's almost like time stops at certain times. And I have had these moments of enjoying my own company that I can see like little snapshots in my memory. One is when I was a child and I don't know what possessed me, but something possessed me to sit at the top of my driveway with my sketchbook and draw. And it was like a really windy afternoon. And I never sat like it was we had chairs. I don't know why, but that day like I had to sit it and I didn't draw a lot as a kid, but that day and I was just in some sort of zone like feeling myself. And then much later, I had a day at the beach where I was supposed to go with friends and everybody bailed at the last minute because I don't know, they stayed out too late the night before or something. It was through this summer program we were all doing. So I went and I sat with my journal on the beach and I just still can remember the tuna fish sandwich I ate that day. These moments. And so our time in Tobago was another one of those moments, except this time the moment was a week long. But it was that feeling myself, being so in tune with myself. I just think of it as when I still think of it as one of the best weeks of my life. Because it's so easy to get caught up in attending to other people. It just is. And on that trip, there was truly no one, and we didn't have cell phones or phone service. It's not like I was. So it was just this bubble of profound self-care of yoga twice a day, other people cooking me like delicious, nutritious food, the beauty of nature all around me, just exquisite. So in terms of long term, I think maybe it was like some of those other moments, a moment that helped me learn how good it felt to be that profoundly in tune with myself. And maybe that helped me on my journey of gaining confidence, making choices that were in line with my inner guidance, as opposed to feeling wrong for wanting to make certain choices. Because if you don't ever spend time with yourself, if you don't get close to yourself, then you can't hear that inner guidance. So I think it would be safe to say I probably made a leap forward that week in how close I was in relationship with myself.
You know what I just remembered too from that week? Before we started recording, listeners, I asked Amanda, I was like, "Have you ever been on the show before?" I just couldn't quite remember, and it would be shocking if she hadn't, but she hadn't. But you have. Do you remember we recorded a podcast in
Yeah,
Tobago one of the nights? Yeah.
I
Does that
do.
ring a vague bell?
I do remember because I remember Tim with the equipment setting
Yes.
up, but I don't remember not me individually or yes, me individually.
No, I think it was like the group. So I'll
Like,
have to pull that up and
oh, that would be
add
fun.
that.
In the
Yeah.
show notes,
Put it in the
include
show notes.
Tobago '06. Yeah, I do. Now that you say that, I am remembering that. I also remember that one of the instructors, Lisa, like her luggage got lost, and I remember she had the sarong or some like one like piece of cloth, and she wore it so many different ways while she waited for her luggage to arrive.
Oh
Oh,
my gosh.
I remember being admiring, wow, like way to pull that off day after day at a yoga retreat. She had that and whatever clothes she had been wearing on the plane. Anyway, random memory, but you start talking
Yeah.
about things and all these small details keep start rushing back into your brain.
Totally. And as you think about improv, and I know it's been such a big part of your life, for listeners who may not know much about it, can you share a bit about how improv in particular has inspired your journey?
Yeah. As I have a book coming out about this called Improvising Adulthood, What I Wish Someone Had Told Me. And listeners, you can probably already tell how I got to the point of writing that book based on what I've shared so far in terms of the difference it made for me. But when I first tried improv in my 20s, it was like a revolutionary experience. So I was always a rule follower. I got straight A's, kept my weight down, wrote nice thank you notes, all the things we're conditioned to do, or I was conditioned to do in the culture that I grew up in. And doing improv, and I think as a young adult, I felt so constrained, like I was supposed to get a job like everyone else. I had a job, but everyone else seemed okay just going to work and doing whatever job they'd stumbled into out of college. And I was miserable at work and I couldn't just suck it up. And I wished I could just suck it up, but I couldn't. So, like a good girl, I was still going, but I was very unhappy. And I was budgeting myself tightly. I was scheduling my time tightly. So, the calendar, the balancing the checkbook, the counting back then, the Weight Watcher points. I just felt so constricted. And so when I first did improv, the first time I tried improv, it was like the skies opened. The amount of just true freedom I felt. So for people who don't know anything about improv, there's short form improv, which is like what if you've ever seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's basically playing fun games. Long form improv is what I studied and performed for many years and have coached. And that's more like making up a play together on the fly. So it's an inherently collaborative art form. You go on stage with other performers and you have no script and there's an audience and you're going to make something up. And so there are certain tools you learn. People always say, how do you have improv practice? Are you cheating? Is there really a script? And no, it's more like going to the gym to get in your reps so that the day that you have to lift the really heavy thing, you can lift the really heavy thing because you've been building your muscles. So the exercises we do in improv practice, the skills that we practice help us show up and do the show with no script. And those skills, it turned out, the skills that help people make something out of nothing together on stage are the same skills that really it takes to make a life. Because if you think about it, we don't have a script. And every day we're inventing, we're making choices. And so the more you practice improv, the more you hone that skill of being present being where you are. Susan Messing is a famous improviser, and she said, if you're in your head, you're not here with me. And when you're on stage as an improviser, you want to notice not just what did this other performer say, but how did they say it? What look was on their face? Because all of that is information. And then you've probably heard of the term yes and. That's one of the core improv skills. Your job is to say yes to what the other improviser has offered and then build on it. So, for example, if someone says, happy birthday, and they roll their eyes, and I want to say yes and to that, I want to say, yeah, thanks. This is a terrible example that I'm coming up with on the fly for you, but I would say thanks. Let's think, how can I yes and somebody saying happy birthday to me in that way? I would want to recognize, I guess I could just say, thanks so much. And the the party you threw me last night full of all of my least favorite things was really something. Right? So I'm acknowledging that this is someone who really has it in for me because of how they said that. And I'm adding information because if all I do is, and this comes to life too. I'm not just going down a rabbit hole of improv, but if all I said was like, thanks a lot, where are we? We have a shared reality because I've affirmed sort of their attitude. But we've gone nowhere. The scene's, it's not exciting if you're in the audience to nothing's happening. But if I take the information from that offer they made and I accept it, and then I build on it and I add the detail about the party, now then I've given them something to play with, right? So all of which is to say, turns out that's a real helpful tool in life beyond this stage as well. Certainly, very literally, if you're ever in a brainstorm or a creative collaboration, literally building on each other's ideas like that is a very powerful tool. Also, a little more metaphorically, in life, embracing the tool of yes and is really powerful because so often our unhappiness comes from fighting against the facts of the circumstances around us. Yesterday, I had a migraine headache. Yes, I had a migraine. I could make the whole story of my day the having of the migraine. But what if I add an and? I had a migraine yesterday, and my daughter spent the afternoon laughing in delight in the next room as she played this new video game she got. As a therapist, I'm sure you can immediately start to see there's a reframing, there's a what are the stories we're telling ourselves? And there are so many other applications for just the tool of yes and. By discovering improv, I really discovered my freedom to make choices for myself and to build something, whether it was a scene or a life, out of those choices.
Yeah, these are great examples, and the yes and, so powerful, the reframing, the what stories am I telling myself, so, so key. And I'm curious for you, as you are in midlife, how improv in particular has been helpful. 'Cause I do feel like there's a lot of reinventing, there's a lot of just improving, like, what is happening to my body, my mind, body, my emotions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we sometimes go through phases, and I certainly feel like midlife, in particular perimenopause, is such a phase where it feels like the rug has been pulled out from underneath us. And I think for me, not to be repetitive, but just the profundity of all we can ever do is make a choice and then make another choice. And I'm not saying I'm perfectly zen and always behaving in this way, but it is a touchstone I bring myself back to of if I start to spin out about the migraines and the this and the that, and it's all perimenopause, and what doctor do I see? Where's the miracle doctor? Oh, I can't find a doctor. Oh, what is all of it perimenopause or some of it? It's like, take a breath and be like, okay, what am I feeling in my body right now? What choice do I want to make to feel better in my body right now? Maybe the choice is a cold pack. Maybe the choice is I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to reach out to friends and try to get a recommendation of a doctor, whatever it is. I can only go one step at a time. So I think that is a very powerful tool for people in midlife. I think it's our instinct is to try to figure everything out. It comes into play too. I have my own business and I'm a writer. I have this book coming out and I start spinning sometimes next year. What's the plan for my business, right? Let me map out the whole year 2025 for Mighty Forces when this will be the big offering and it'll all come together like this. And it's not that it's never worth sketching out a vision or something, but you trick yourself into thinking that a lot is happening when really all that's happened is that you've put a lot of ideas on paper and you think you can figure it all out on paper, but you really do have to live into these things. And again, it's reminding myself like one choice at a time. Like, that's great. I got all that out. Now, what am I choosing to do today in service of clarifying that vision or in service of, and sometimes it's also the humility of realizing you just need to let it sit too. Like, all there is to do right now is to feel what's there to feel. That's what comes up. And
Yeah.
Kimberly, it's so funny you mentioned Tobago because I hadn't thought about what I'm about to share coming into today, but I remember being on the bus in Tobago with you, and I don't know where we were going with, was it Pigeon, the name of the man who drove us?
I can't remember, I maybe?
I forget, he had a nickname and I want to say it was Pigeon
Yeah.
or something, but and saying to you that I thought improv and yoga had so much in common and you being really curious about that. You can start to see like the idea of embodiment and presence and I think too the sort of balance between like you set an intention at the beginning of your yoga practice and then you move into your practice and sometimes at least in my experience the thing that I don't know, something else comes to the forefront as the message of the practice, not the thing that not related in a linear, direct, obvious way to the intention that I set. And it's similar with improv. Sometimes the wisdom comes through the action, through the movement, through the scene. Improvisers who sit in the wings and try to outsmart the process and be like, all right, so in this next scene, I'm going to do this and it's going to make it hilarious and the audience is going to love it. And you get out there and another, because you're not alone, another actor makes another choice. And then you're just spinning out, as opposed to if you hold loosely, I'm going to give myself, I think as I enter this scene, I think my character has an insatiable hunger. I think I'm going to play with that in this scene. And you go in and you're lightly holding this idea about your character. And then you see what happens. What are the other characters, the other actors bringing? And maybe that lightly held choice helps you because it becomes a filter through which you offer your first response, something related to. But maybe if you're in your body and you see what that actor does next, you realize the way to honor that the most is to let go of the thing that you were holding onto loosely, to really yes and whatever that other actor has offered. So it's that dance, right? So
Well, and
there's
that's
um,
yeah. It's like such a good reminder for life, right? It's like, how do we hold loosely our expectations and our plans? And then it helps prevent a lot of suffering from gripping, and this has to be this way, and they have
mhm.
to read everything I wrote in the email. And do you know what I mean? All the things that really can get to us. And it's we hold it loosely. We hope they pick up on the bulleted items. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly. And it also, I think, in that sense, when you realize that we're all out here improvising all the time, too, I think it really helps me relax with myself and with other people too, because it's so easy when someone does something that we wish they hadn't done or that we don't understand to architect immediately this whole story about why they did it and what it means. And I just like feel tightness in my body just even saying that. And to realize like everyone is out here making it up as they go, just like you are. I don't know, seeing there's power on an individual level. I think it's very liberating to embrace an improviser's orientation to the world. I also think in terms of relationships and in terms of our place in community and society, it's realizing like we are inherently in this together, just as the improvisers are on stage. can try to be the genius who scripts it all out, but oops, other people are going to get in the way, quote unquote, because other people, like, you need to work with other people. That's how we're all, that's how the world goes round. I do think it's really a helpful tool for being in relationship with others.
So funny because I was looking over and I'm like, that is the next question that I wanted to
We're
touch
so
on,
in
right? Is
sync.
relationships and connections. And for you, Amanda, because of course you've been in DC and then I know you were in New York. You're in New York now, but in the Brooklyn area, and now you're in upstate and right. These shifts and how like I've been in DC for, I don't know, like 26 years or something. I can't even do the math, but a long time. Yeah, almost 30 years, I think. But
Yeah.
anyway, for you, there's been so much transition. And of course, for me too, even though I've been in the same place, as we know, DC is very transitory. For you, how have you been able to maintain relationships and keep your core and develop new friendships, especially moving to upstate New York, which people rave about that area, the Hudson Valley area? So many creatives and artists and all the things. So, talk a little bit about that because it's such an important piece in midlife.
Yeah, it is. You've put me in a contemplative place. I think that, honest, I don't think I've ever felt as strong a sense of community as I did when I was doing improv and yoga back in DC. Tranquil Space was a hub of community for me, and Washington Improv Theater, shout out to them, also known as WIT. Um, what a to be part of a creative community like that was just a beautiful thing. And I always felt like a fish out of water in DC. I just believe we have chemistry with places as much as we do with people. And so I do think that in seeking out a place that I felt the right chemistry with, a sacrifice that I made along the way was that vibrant in-person community. That's not to say it's not maybe as extreme as I'm making it sound. It's not a lonely Amanda ever since she left DC, all alone in the world. We've made Jordan, my husband is named Jordan. He and I have made friends everywhere we've gone. In during our time in New York City, we had a child. She's now 12, but that was a really great way to find community. The daycare that we put her in when she was a baby. I think when you're going through a major life transition of any kind and you meet other people who are going through the same life transition, it's very bonding. And so that was a tremendous source of community and connection for us. But the truth is, a lot of I have very people who are very dear to me, and they're not all in DC, a number of them are, but also in LA and Florida and abroad. And part of the rhythm of our lives has become um, finding ways to spend time with people who don't live down the block from us. So the way I fill my cup on a relationship level is staying in touch with people through text and scheduled Zoom calls and being on social media. I actually gave up Facebook for a while because I don't like the company behind Facebook. And then in the pandemic, crumbled and went back because there is something so powerful about being able to just see, oh, Michelle's reading this book and Katie's been painting, but now she's playing with collage and this is what there's a way it makes you feel connected to a larger community, even if you're not like bumping into them or having conversations with them all the time. And then the treasure is that everywhere I've lived, I've met people who are very dear to me. And I would say that while moving around as much as we have, I think has interfered with our ability to have a really thriving in-person community. It's also allowed us to meet people we wouldn't have otherwise met, and that it just puts the onus on us to keep in touch with people and schedule time to be together in person with people.
Yeah, yeah, so important. It really is so important, especially as we get older. And but I hear from my young clients, everyone struggles with this, I think, particularly outside of college, because it's hard to have roots and build community. But I love that in DC you had those too and that were really foundational and important to you. And that makes a difference, you know. So for listeners just thinking about what are your interests? And if things aren't out there, communities already in place, is there something that you could start like a little improv group or a little let's get together and do yoga online? Maybe we don't have a studio, but we could do some yoga online together. Something that just would allow you to connect with like-hearted people.
And I love what you just said because it to me is shows underscores the importance of agency to our joy. I had to call on my own agency over and over again every time I moved when the thing tranquil space wasn't just sitting there waiting for me in New York City. Thanks a lot, Kimberly. No, I can't believe you weren't in New York City there for me.
I know.
But
How did
like,
we not follow you around?
it's really offensive actually. But no, and I will, but the idea that you can create the thing you want. As an artist, as an entrepreneur, those two things resonate deeply with it's being creative. That's what
Mhm.
having agency is. It's being creative, it's creating. So if the thing you want isn't there, create it. And I think that is very in line with this whole idea of approaching life as improv. Sometimes the choice, the thing you want to choose doesn't exist. And so then the question is like, how do you get creative and make it happen? And I think fundamentally, so many of us were raised in a school system where it's about sitting still and listening and memorizing. And really, it's very rare that we get an education in making choices for ourselves or in creating the things we want to see in the world. And I want to give you a shout out because you were the first person I truly ever met who I felt, oh, her insides and her outsides match. I felt I could see how you had designed this life with the yoga studio and the clothing line and the podcast, all of the stuff. And every time, even today, I log on to Zoom and there's Kimberly. Like it's always Kimberly. You express yourself through like in all ways, through all the things you do. And I think that was truly part of what helped me be like, oh, so if I'm wanting something that isn't a kind of adult life that isn't one I've seen modeled. Like you were a role model. You were the first
Thank
person
you.
who was like, oh, this is different. And she created all that herself. Like she started the yoga studio in her living room and then went to the church. And then now she has the yoga. And then she wanted to do clothes and she's doing the clothes. And those are all because of choices she made. And so, anyway, not to take us off track, but just with what you said, like side note listeners, look for a way to get involved with people that you have something in common with. And if it doesn't exist, create it. Like that's a great just mantra. If it doesn't exist, create it.
Absolutely. I think it's such a good reminder because there's so often that people will feel like, I don't know, there's a product or there's not a service that they want or a community. And it's, do you have the capacity to make maybe a teeny tiny version of it even?
It doesn't have to be fully baked. It doesn't have to be big and official and glossy. It could be inviting three people over saying, hey, I know you wanted to walk more. I want to walk more. What if we started walking on Sunday mornings? Right? That's creating the thing. It doesn't have to be like I launched a business or I opened a yoga studio. You and I did that with some of our writing dates, right?
Yes.
Over the years, we've had these creative check-ins with each other more at times and less at times. But I think that's probably both of us creating something that we need for ourselves together.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe it's not a group. Maybe it is just particularly one-on-ones that, similar to what we do and have done in the past. It's powerful. I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I personally really wish that we could think of how we raise people so that they are aware that they can create what they want in life. Because for me, I think a big part of why I struggled so much in my early adulthood was, and I guess I've said it before, but um, you succeed, and I'm using air quotes, by doing things the way other people want you to do them for so much of your early life. And then all of a sudden, it's okay, now what do you want to major in? What do you want to be when you grow up? So I get to choose. Nobody ever asked me. You didn't ask me what I wanted when I went into high school. You didn't ask me what I wanted when I went into this is not about my parents. This is like my parent. I don't mean to suggest that like my parents gave me no choices. I mean, they gave me incredible opportunities, but just the fundamental construct of how our education system works. It's not about what interests you and all the data I ingested in my education. There was like never a class that was like, here's how to develop self-awareness, be aware of what you want, and then go get it.
Right.
Arguably is the most important skill.
Absolutely. And when I'm curious, what have you found to be some of the bigger challenges with regard to midlife? You mentioned perimenopause,
Yeah.
and we're actually recording this on World Menopause Day. Did you know
Are
that?
we? I didn't know that. Wow.
Wasn't
Well,
in your planner.
yeah, no, excuse me. It wasn't in my planner, and I've not been on social media today yet, so I haven't seen the hashtag. No, I think that's wonderful. It's great that there's so much more public conversation about menopause and perimenopause than there certainly was 20 years ago or before that. I think the biggest challenges have been health related for me, just physical, not mental health, actually. I think not like I never struggle with my mental health, but I feel like that was more my early adulthood, getting a handle on, oh, it turns out I have anxiety and depression. And now it's like I said, I get migraines. So I've been working with a nutritionist on that. I also I have medication for when I get an attack, but I've seen a lot of progress with the nutritionist, but I feel, without opening up here all Amanda's health issues, I feel I'm always trying to solve a problem when it comes to my health. And I get very depressed and tired about the project of my health, especially because I eat very nutritionally. I'm certainly more on the sedentary side than on the active side of things. I was with a friend this morning who was like, exercise makes me happy. And I was like, what's that like? Um, but I do walk every day and this, that, and the other. So it's frustrating to feel like you're making so many healthy choices and you're investing so much energy and time into seeing this specialist or that specialist, whether it's a nutritionist or a doctor or whatever it is, acupuncturist. And then you still wake up and you have the headache, or you still wake up and the other thing, so that is a real bummer. And I think that one of the things that's helped me is really developing a different kind of relationship with my body. I started seeing, I don't know if you're familiar with somatic experiencing, but I've discovered that form of therapy a few years ago. And really, for someone who has spent so much of her life in her head, being intellectual and analyzing and all of this. I think one of the reasons that yoga resonated with me as powerfully as it did back in the era we were talking about is because it was a way of somatic experiencing of, and I feel like I have gotten a lot of comfort and insight from the kind of somatic experiencing I've been doing. So for people who don't know what that is, it might sound out there, but it's based on this idea, and if you've read The Body Keeps the Score, this will probably pretty quickly resonate, but the idea that our bodies store stories and information. And when you sit in a session, or at least my experience with a somatic therapist, they might just like, we'll talk a little bit, and then maybe they'll just put their hand on, I don't know, my foot. And all of a sudden, I have, there's my dad. And I know it sounds insane. What, Amanda? Are you are you tripping? No. But, and then there's this sort of following the story as it unfolds through engagement with your body. And also just learning another dimension of the somatic therapy is also just being able to articulate feelings without intellectualizing them too. So just like naming sensations in my body. So without trying to teach a mini course on somatic experiencing, if you're intrigued, go look it up. Not you and your listeners, but it's that way of relating to my body has been maybe a way of feeling powerful in my body and close to my body in a positive way at the same time that I'm having these challenges. Maybe it
Right.
helps balance out so that not everything happening on the body front feels like a problem.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you. And my last question for you, Amanda, is the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. How are you finding tranquility in your everyday? It sounds like somatic experiencing, improv.
Yeah. I think my two key tools are meditation and journaling. Uh, Actually, this friend I was talking to this morning, the one who loves the rigorous exercise, and she's, I'm just not right until I sweat it out. And I was like, I'm just not right until I write my morning pages. Thank you, Artist Way, which I also found through you, Kimberly, and meditate. And sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's more I love sound baths. I freaking love sound baths. So there's an app I use called Insight Timer, and they have I really like this guy Sonic Yogi, and there are tracks you can play where it's essentially a sound bath. And I'll just lie there and or sit there and for 20 or 30 minutes just let that wash over me. And when I open my eyes at the end of that, I am 1,000 times more tranquil and centered and present. Those are my two
Beautiful.
things.
Thank you. And listeners, I'll put a link to these in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here, Amanda. It's always a treat to see you.
Oh my gosh, same. Thank you so much.